Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating story that brings together physics, Twitter, and a prison sentence. It's the very complex case of Dr. Chen Jingyuan.
So let's start with the man himself. These are his own words from a letter he wrote from prison. He sees himself not as some kind of political figure, but as a physicist, an independent scholar, someone who's just driven by this deep, lifelong need to learn.
And that's the big question, right? How does an act that, millions of us do every single day, forwarding something online, how does that lead to a physicist being put behind bars? We're going to break down exactly how this happened.
Okay, first up, let's just lay the groundwork. To really get what happened here, we need to understand who Dr. Chen is and the specific events that led to his arrest.
So who is Dr. Chen? Well, from everything we've read, he's not an activist. He's a dedicated researcher. In fact, after working at different institutions, he actually moved back to his rural home to take care of his aging parents, all while continuing his studies on his own.
And then, in 2023, that life of quiet scholarship just came to a halt. A court in Kunming sentenced him to 1 year and 8 months in prison.
And what was his crime? Get this. The entire case was built on his activity on Twitter, a platform he was using special software to even access. The prosecution's evidence was literally just a collection of posts he'd shared and commented on.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. You have to understand the specific law they used against him. This isn't your typical libel or slander case. It's a charge that legal experts describe as, well, notoriously flexible.
The official charge is sunshin zushi, which translates to picking quarrels and provoking trouble. Think about that name. Legal experts have nicknamed it a pocket crime because its definition is so incredibly broad. It's like a pocket you can just stuff anything into, especially when it comes to online speech.
Now, check this out, because this is the strict legal standard. For someone to be convicted of this, the prosecution has to prove all three of these things. 1, the information has to be factually false. 2, the person sharing it has to know it's false. That's malice. And 3, it has to cause real serious chaos in public. The legal analysis is crystal clear. If you're missing even one of these pillars, the whole case is supposed to collapse.
All right, so that's the prosecution. But what about the defense? This is where Dr. Chen, the physicist, really starts to shine. From his prison cell, he didn't just say, "I'm innocent." He used his scientific training to systematically take the case apart, piece by piece.
I mean, just put yourself in his shoes for a second. The evidence against you isn't a smoking gun. It's cartoons, news articles, and opinions you shared online. How do you even begin to argue against that?
Well, he did what a scientist would do. He broke down the problem. He took all the so-called evidence from the prosecution and sorted it into 4 logical categories: art, emotion, reason, and description.
And this is the core of his entire argument. He basically said, you can't even apply a true or false test to the first 3 categories. I mean, how can a satirical cartoon be a rumor? How can an expression of feeling be false? Logically, he argued, they just don't belong in a courtroom discussion about facts.
And this is just a brilliant move. The court was essentially saying, hey, you've got a PhD, you should have known better. But Dr. Chen completely flips that on its head. He says, no, it's because of my education that I'm a skeptic. It's taught me the limits of what we can know, which makes it impossible for me to knowingly spread a falsehood about some complex issue I can't verify myself. So as analysts started looking at this case, this trial of ideas and questioning, they saw something familiar, a pattern, an echo really from one of the most famous trials in all of human history.
Believe it or not, they argue that what happened in that courtroom in Kunming is a modern-day reflection of the trial of the philosopher Socrates, all the way back in ancient Athens.
Let's put them side by side. The specific charges look different on the surface, sure, but when you dig in, the story is shockingly similar. In both cases, you have a thinker who is accused of shaking things up, of disrupting the social order just by spreading ideas. And crucially, both of them defended themselves not by begging for mercy, but by appealing to logic and a higher principle, the pursuit of truth.
It all comes back to this one famous Socratic idea, that the unexamined life just isn't worth living. It's this belief that it's our job as people, and especially as thinkers, to ask questions, to examine things, to reflect. That's the highest calling, even if, and maybe especially if, it makes powerful people a little uncomfortable.
Okay, so for our last section, let's pull the lens back and look at the bigger picture here. What does a case like this signify for the legal system itself?
And when you read the legal reviews of this verdict, they are absolutely scathing. They basically say the prosecution failed, period. There was no real proof the information was false, zero evidence of malice, and absolutely no demonstration of any actual public chaos. They argue the trial itself was flawed, even flipping the legal standard by making Dr. Chen prove his own innocence.
And that leads to this really powerful conclusion from one of the analyses. The idea that this case isn't just a mistake, but it's an example of what happens when the legal system is abused, when law stops being about finding facts and becomes just another tool for exercising power.
So you might be asking, why does this one case about one man even matter? Well, the sources argue that this was never really just about a physicist and a couple of tweets. It's about a fundamental question. Where does any society draw the line between keeping order and silencing ideas it doesn't like? So we're going to leave you with the same question that the source materials leave us with, a question that kind of hangs in the air long after the gavel falls. When the simple act of asking a question or sharing an idea becomes a crime, is it the person who is truly on trial, or is it the system itself?